Hello! Hi to anyone out there watching. I'm just going to do my standard thing that I do at the top of every stream, which is check that I'm audible. Standard thing that I do. Amazing, I am. Sorry, that's me being like very bad with tech this morning. You can tell that maybe I'm not approaching this with the same level of just calm as every morning, given by the fact that like my hair is still wet and everything. But yes, hello. This is Text Adventure Time. If you have not seen this stream before, then it's one in a series of streams about basically making games with Twine, how that works, and sharing ways of doing that to try and make it a little less intimidating and put a lot of information about it in the same place. My standard caveat is that I'm not like I'm not a trained coder. I have professionally made things in Twine using Harlow. I'm getting a little bit of familiarity with SugarCube, but I'm not quite at the point of sharing pearls of wisdom about that yet. But yes, I'm not giving kind of a trained perspective on this. I'm giving quite a low jargon, practical experience perspective. And just sharing things that I know and how I personally do them and giving some kind of step-by-steps so it's hopefully easy to follow. If you have not seen the previous sessions of Text Adventure Time, I think this is the fourth. Those went over a lot of the basics, like how to navigate Twine, different types of links, how to make things look different visually, doing things with embedding images, with embedding audio, and bits and pieces on variables and starting to get to grips with those. And today the focus is going to be making an inventory and also, hopefully, provided there's time, there should be time, starting to look at using timers so that you can have text appear at kind of in timed intervals and that kind of thing. So we're just kind of going to get to it. If you're curious about the previous videos, then just do !VOD in chat and that will send you the link to the Roll Flip Draw YouTube channel, where there is a playlist that shows all of the past bits and pieces of this. But let's get to it. So obviously an inventory is somewhere where if you are doing a game where people are picking things up or they have information to keep track of, you might want an inventory. I'm going to keep just calling it inventory as the standard thing, but I've done games where, for instance, players have had a book, and so they might have been noting things down in their book, but it worked exactly the same way as having an inventory of items that they were picking up as they kind of went around the world and did the game. And it is fairly simple. We're getting to the point in these streams where I will be doing a bit of copying and pasting rather than just typing everything out live, because some of this is in my head automatically and little bits of it are not. But yes, basically an inventory is a way of making it so that your players can see what they've got rather than just the game tracking it. So I'm gonna go into Twine. I'm going to make a passage. Just gonna check that this is all, yep, you're getting a decent view of it. We're gonna make a new passage and we're just gonna call it footer. Obviously, you might have different places you want your inventory to show. You could always do this and just replace it with header. And we are also going to give this the footer tag. Now, I'm aware this is the first time I've mentioned tags during these streams. So basically, it's very simple to add a tag to something. You just press this button, you give it the tag name, you click add, or you click cancel. And if you add one and you want to take it away, you just go remove footer. I personally never change the color. It's something I've never needed to do. It might work for other people's brains or be useful, but it's not something that I've had the need for. So this is footer. You want to tag it footer. So what this is going to do is mean that the inventory is always going to show in a footer at the bottom of the game screen, basically. And there's a very specific bit of code that I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste into here. So this is what you want to then, this is the information you want to put in your footer passage. Now some of this isn't essential. This is just because I want to align it in the center to make it look nice. And this is because if you put 3 dashes, that will create a line in the visual of your Twine game. And for me, it's just separating it so it's always easy for the player to see like what they're currently looking at, what's changing, what game content they're interacting with, and what is the constant that's still there at the bottom, what is the footer, what is separate basically. So that's not absolutely essential. But this, here we are. This kind of, obviously the stars are just to make it italic. That's another stylized thing. And these Kylies are just to, as we've talked about before, is to make sure that no code is showing or no code is taking up the space on the page, that it's all just omitted. But basically, what this means is if I add a tag to a passage, which is just all one word, show inventory, then it will show this text here. And you can see there's a link within that to inventory. So not only are we looking at tags, we're also adding tags. This is one way that you can create tags. I might talk a little bit in a future stream about how else you create tags, because I've actually been doing a lot with tags lately, because I've been recreating Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney games in Twine, which has involved a lot of very specific tags for different changing background images. But this is a nice, calmer introduction to what tags are. So you want to put that in footer, and then obviously let's move somewhere that's a little bit wider. This is just kind of all the bits and pieces from the previous streams, obviously. And obviously because we did the 2 square brackets, it's created the inventory passage automatically. So you want to bring that up, and then here we go. This is the only other bit with inventories that I need to paste in. So it's going to look a little bit complicated. I get that. What this basically means is that if there is anything in the inventory, so if the inventory's length is more than 0, then it will give you a list saying your inventory contains A. And of course, if you change this to say like your book contains A, or your bag has A, or you are holding A, etc., whatever the flavor that you want for whatever you're kind of using this for in your game, you can put right there. And then what this means is just that if this isn't the case, if it's not the case that the inventory's length is more than 0, it will just say your inventory's empty, your book's empty, you have nothing in your hand, etc. This is an important bit. It's probably actually like an important tool that I don't use enough in other games or in other contexts. All this means is that at the bottom of whatever inventory list you have, it will say return to the room, and it will take you back to the last location you've been to, the last passage that a player has been looking at. Because otherwise it wouldn't necessarily know, or you'd be having to use like the little back arrow, which you might want to remove in your game. I might see if we can fit in that here, because it's a very quick fix for that, so I've not put it into any streams yet. But yes, that's basically what this means. So, say we were going to do a little thing. I'm going to add a couple more passages as an example. Here are there's still a couple of stages that you need to do to make sure you have a working inventory. I'm just going to name this just so I know what it is. Kettle. So let's say this is where we're going to start. So you're going to have to do this at the top of either your game or before an inventory becomes relevant. Set into... Okay. So this is something that you need right at the top. Basically, I guess if you imagine it as this is the bag that everything goes into. You need the empty bag to begin with to put things into, and if you don't put this, the game gets very confused, the code gets confused, because it's like you don't have the bag that the stuff's even going to go into. I can show you kind of what errors you might get if you don't have this, but you'll want to have this. So let's say go get water, and we're going to go here, and now I'm going to show you how you would add something to an inventory. So you go set inv, because if we go back here, we've obviously got inv. You could change that. Like, for instance, when I've had games that have used both an inventory and a notebook, there has been a totally separate thing, which is if $books length. But you just need to make sure that basically it matches whatever's in there. So set inv to inv plus water. Now, this is like the kind of core code that you need to add something to inventory. The most common issues I've had, it's always been human error. It's been that I have forgotten this bit and I've just done it as plus water. It's because I've forgotten one of the brackets at the end, that kind of thing. I'm gonna show you a couple of details about this as we go through, but let's just do this. So what you also want to do, as we mentioned, show inventory, not shoe inventory, show inventory. If we didn't have the show inventory tag, I mean, let me show you what happens if I don't have the show inventory tag. In that case, we go to kettle. I'm just going to make sure you can see what I can see. Oh, let's shuffle that a little bit, shall we? Because I obviously didn't set this well up enough in my brief period before the stream started. Here we go. So those 3 dashes, I will show you what's happened there, but basically go get water, and if basically in the corner, as we've seen in previous streams, there's the little kind of debug that shows you what's going on. I can see that I've got the string water, but the thing is I've got no way of actually getting to an inventory. So let's head back, and that's because I haven't put show inventory. And I'm going to just add that as a tag. Let's just go here. I'm going to see if just that is enough to separate it out. Yeah, that is sufficient. So basically those 3, did I? Oh no. Sorry, I forgot to I thought I was showing you what I was doing in Twine. I wasn't showing you what I was doing in Twine because I was being rubbish. So basically I added the show inventory tag here by just typing show inventory, adding, and then what I was doing was, because I could see these 3 dashes appearing just after, because it was there, I just did a little enter and bring it down, because basically it was registering that as coming straight after the go get water text. Because it was doing that, it wasn't actually treating it as a new line to create that clear line underneath. So having done that, we now have go get water with a line underneath. There are ways you can alter the appearance of the line so it's not kind of, this might not be what you want. You also can obviously not have a line at all. We're going to go get water, and hey, we've got check inventory. This is centered, but just because of the way it's being captured in OBS at the moment and streamed, that's why it looks lopsided. That's just because it's being captured that way. And then we go check inventory. Your inventory contains a water. And then if we click return to room, it takes us back to the blank page that we had with checking the inventory. So there's a couple of small stylistic things I want to quickly go over. And I will obviously also then show you how to take things out of your inventory. But you'll have noticed that obviously it says it contains water. What I've tended to do with my games to make it consistent, because it is hard to make sure that that sounds and looks right, is that I've always actually had people only able to pick up items that would follow the letter A. So like you have a cup of water or you have a jug of water, etc., so that it doesn't look quite so strange. However, there's another little thing that I want to mention. You see that obviously it was just at one line of saying your thing has you have some water. Let's say that we pick something else up as well. Let's say we just grab a teaspoon, because this is because of the really coherent tea making game that is being created across these streams that definitely isn't just totally haphazard. Then if we go to the actual game and go to the inventory, your inventory contains a water teaspoon. Now, that's not too bad because it's only a couple of things and because they're, short words and such, like we've only got one line. But obviously you can imagine that if you had lots of things in inventory, then you might not want one big block of text. So how I typically do inventories or adding items to an inventory, and definitely with notebooks and things like that, because you've got a lot of text, which can be a lot if you've got one big block, is I just do that. And every time it is entered and then it comes in, because as I'll be able to show you, let me just get it up and then I'll kind of take you straight to it. This is what that then looks like. It's actually a line and it's slightly easier. And obviously you could put in more spaces if you wanted there to be a space between every single item. But that's just a little thing about how to make it a bit more visually appealing or easy to go through. And now what I'm just going to clarify as well, that you don't have to do a separate entry if you're putting two things into an inventory, but they're on the same page. Because obviously what I've put here is this, but if I wanted to actually just add multiple things, I could do it like this. Teaspoon. And that would have just the same effect of adding multiple items to an inventory. Again, as like a general rundown of reasons I've had issues with this in the past, or common troubleshoots, or like human errors, is forgetting the commas between them, or missing one of the speech marks or something like that. It's always just something where I've deviated from the actual core code and I've just forgotten, because there's various things to keep a track of. So let's just say, okay, you pick up a glass of water and a teaspoon. Let's do that. So now we've got put the kettle on. We're going to put water in the kettle. You know when you make tea and you like pour yourself a glass of water and then you take that glass of water to a kettle and then you put it in the kettle? That's the classic means we're mimicking. So let's say we now want it to represent that they don't have water anymore. So that would be set, I mean, it's quite, you can probably guess, set inv to inv minus a, and then water. And yeah, that's again, classic thing about Twine, which is really great, is that I've not put enough curved brackets, so it's not actually changed the highlight or the colors of things. And then when I do, confirms that I've done the right thing. One thing to remember is that if you are using the tactic of having this on the second line. If you're not doing it like that, but you're doing it like that, you need that to be consistent throughout any time you want to reference this. Because, well, I'll show you what happens. So go get some water. Picked up a glass of water and a teaspoon. Do we definitely have those? Yeah, we absolutely do. Put the kettle on. Well, we can't even look there because we haven't put... This is one of the things as well, having to remember to tag things. It can be a bit laborious, but it's how it works, and ultimately it is kind of simple, and it's at least a nice thing to be able to keep track of. Right, I've just added show inventory to the next page. So check inventory. It still has water because as far as the game is concerned, we've not removed that water. You'll see that it doesn't have any issue with removing something that isn't already in the inventory. That's not going to bring up an error code all of its own. But if we actually want to remove water, then what we need to do is make sure that... I'm just going to make sure that this is really clear what I'm doing. What we want to make sure is that it's not this, it's this. It's exactly the same layout and form as what we've had before. And that way, if we go get water, then we put the kettle on, check the inventory, we've only got a teaspoon left because the water's been poured away. Now, obviously, I'm doing this in a very swift, bare bones way because this is just to show the framework of it. But if you're doing it in a game, obviously you might want a bit more for the players, because if I was playing that, I'd go, I've no idea that I even necessarily definitely had water and that I've poured that water away there. You'd want something in the text or something. That's getting more into game design, and I know that's not what you're here for. But just a reminder that obviously stuff that is super clear to you as you're coding it, it's always good to confirm those changes and those things happening in some way for the audience. Right, so there's a couple of other things to show you about inventories, and then we will move on to timers. So I said I would show you, just so it's very clear, what happens if you've not made the bag for things to go into. You're going to get a message like this. So this is just basically, if you ever see this message, that's what it's about. It's about the fact that the items that want to go in an inventory have no inventory to go into. The number 0 isn't the same type of data as an array. It's just because it looks like you're trying to treat these it's... Right now, inventory is just an empty thing, and you're trying to treat it as something else, and that's what's confusing it. And again, this is the kind of stuff, I only show this just because I've had so many times of making games where I've not necessarily known what the error message means or what is the thing that is causing it, and that's been a big thing. So if you'll now recognize a little bit of, oh, this is something to do with inventory. Oh, it's probably because I haven't got something. And also it's something that comes up if you are testing games, because you might go, oh, I just want to test it from this point. I'm not going to test it from the top. And because you're halfway through, you're not going through that path that you've already made that has the set inv2 brackets a colon bracket. And the game will be showing error messages that actually when people play it all the way through, it won't be showing that. So that's just something to keep mindful of and be aware of. So the one other thing that I want to show you with inventories right now, though if there is anything you want to know in particular, folks are welcome to say in chat, is if you wanted to have something that was dependent on inventory. So let's say this. We're just going to change this. We're going to update this. So we're going to make a link that says pick up water. and then a link that says, I'm not doing anything. So I'll try and make this swift. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this and make this a thing. I hope this is something you can do. I don't know if I've actually done it this way before. Normally I do some things a different way, which I will show you. And then go to, what is the title of the next one? Put the kettle on. Okay. Go to put the kettle on, remembering to make sure we're matching the capitals. I think I'm not doing anything, and this one is just going to be go to put the kettle on. So one of them will add to the inventory, and one of them is simply not adding to the inventory. And also we're going to remember to actually put the inventory back in. Set inv to inv plus set inv to 2. Getting ahead of myself there. I'm just going to very quickly check that this actually does what I expect it to. Yep, that's great. Yep, that's great. Okay. So basically I wanted just to check that that works within the context of links. So obviously this is, I talked about this way of linking between things previously. It's very useful if you want it to be a clickable thing that takes someone somewhere and changes like variables or updates the inventory, etc. That's great. So what we're going to do in put the kettle on is go if inv contains. This is sometimes deceptive, and sometimes the reason that I personally, if I'm on a project and doing a lot of inventory stuff, will forget at other points to put the kind of like brackets a colon in a little section, is because this just needs this. It doesn't need anything else. So if inv contains water, remembering to make sure it's got the little, that we're not doing water, we're doing water. If inventory contains water, you pour the water into the kettle and turn it on. Right now I'm just going to go else. You can't turn on an empty kettle because they don't have water. So let's just take a look at that and see how it goes. So we've got go get water. We can check the inventory. Let's say I'm not going to do anything. You can't turn on an empty kettle because you don't have water. For now, I'm just going to use the undo button. You can't quite see it. It's just out of the, it's just to the left of all of this. But instead, I'm going to go pick up water. You pour water into the kettle and turn it on. So that's how you can make the things in people's inventories actually have an impact. Obviously, what you'd want to make sure you're doing here is, I'm just going to show you something. Go away. And then come back. Just because when you get into things like inventories, there's so much to pay attention to. There is quite a bit that it's, when I say so much to pay attention to, it's more you just have to have a good memory or have good notes because you need to make sure that it's not remembering to not just show the internet when I'm trying to show. Sorry, what I'm doing is just I'm just doing a little thing so you can go away from put the kettle on and come back to it. So yes, it's more just like being able to keep track of things. So we're going to go just briefly through this. Going to get water. We're definitely going to pick up water, pour the water kettle and turn it on. Going to go away. Going to come back. You can see that even though I've already poured water into the kettle and I've already turned it on, I'm just getting the same as before because there is still water in the inventory. So it's always going to show me that, unless I make sure to put in that when I choose that, I take the water out, which would basically, I'm probably not going to show you the playthrough of this because you can see how it would affect it. You pour the water into the empty kettle and turn it on. You just want to make sure to go set inv to inv minus water. And that way, making sure to do two brackets. And that way, when you come back, you will get, right now, you'll get you can't turn on an empty kettle. So what you then, this is where things start to kind of build a little bit or start to pile. So I'll show you a little bit because this kind of gets a bit more into how things end up having to combine. So let's say set kettle to on. Because basically whenever a player does something that you want to have a concrete impact, you're going to have to register it somehow. And then what I would personally do is I would go if, and I would put this at the top for my brain, if kettle is on, the kettle is still boiling. And then after that, I would put everything else inside a pair of square brackets. So basically what this means is if the kettle's on, it's going to tell you that it's still boiling. If that's not the case, it will run onto all of these bits of code. And so the first thing it will check is, does the inventory contain water? Great. If it contains water, you turn it on. Now the kettle is on. And then if there isn't any water, so if the kettle's not on, if there isn't any water, it's you can't turn on an empty kettle. I'll show you, I will actually show you how that plays just in case like it's not fully clear. But this is the kind of thing where you start having to kind of track a few more things. So we're going to pick up water. We've poured the water into the kettle. We've turned it on. We're going to go away, wander around. We're going to come back. The kettle's still boiling. So it shows like it's recognized various things. And we have the kind of response that we would want, or at least like makes sense in a real world context. So I think in terms of inventories, it may seem very basic, but it is just something where it's like, as long as you've copied those initial things in, you've made your footer, you've made the inventory passage, and then you just have things getting added and getting taken away, you're good. Something I would say is occasionally there are types of code or entries that I've had games struggle with as inventory entries. Normally that's things that involve like special characters of some form. So I would recommend, like, if you're having an issue, see if you can switch things around. One thing that I have sometimes had to use as a workaround, just to show, what on earth is that? Here we are. I've had to do something like, for instance, if I've wanted to put something into a notebook, but it has lots of dashes, it has lots of dots, and lots of things that a game might misinterpret as a piece of code. What I've found to work for me as a workaround is set, inventory entry or whatever I'm going to call it, so that I remember that's what it is, so that I recognize it. I've made it into a variable, and then I've put the variable into set inventory to inv plus a plus inventory entry, because an inventory can contain variables, which can be very good. It can also be really cool for players, especially if like they've entered some text that you've made into a variable. I might do text entry if I can squeeze it in at the end of this one, because I feel like that's such a big thing that I've not got to yet, and it's remarkably simple. But yes, I found that to be a workaround for anyone that has issues with inventories. And I reckon we're all good on inventories. Like you know how to do it now. You have all of the tools. You have all of the tools. So what we're going to look at next is, I definitely had a thing to show this. Aha! Using timers. Such slick production quality here. Now, there might be a couple of different thoughts of what I mean when I say timers. I'm not currently, at least in this session, going to look at countdowns. I have found ways of making them work in Harlow before, and then I've come back to them and tried to use them like a couple of years later using the same code, and it's really struggled. That is one of the places where I would say Harlow is trickier to make that kind of stuff work. Like if you wanted just like a countdown timer going throughout the whole game, I am going to have a little fresh look and see if I can make the code that I used to use with that and used to work. Gonna see if I can make that work again. But for now, what I'm talking about is using a timer that's running in the background so that you can have text appear at certain times, text disappear at certain times, so that you can have timed elements happening in a passage. So I'm just going to show this very basically. Kettle time. Now this is how I do it. There might be like other ways that people do it, but this is just kind of how I picked it up. So how I'm going to share it. So I'm just going to call this thing trans counter. And it's just because that's what it's always been called when I've looked at it, when I've like researched it, and now that's just kind of embedded in my head. But I mean, it's a variable. I'm pretty sure that if you change it, like there are reasons I've changed it to other things, which I can talk about, but actually I want to set it to 0. And then I'm going to do this. I'm probably going to do a bit of typing and then explain to it. 1. I will tell you what this means. Okay, so I'll show this to you in a second, but basically what you need is, you always need some kind of like setting this thing to 0. Presumably you want it at 0. It's the thing that always makes the most sense to just count up from 0, but you could change that if you had any reason to. But basically one of the big reasons for doing this, you need a number that is counted up from, and I've done a lot of games where different passages have used counters, and if you don't always remember to set it to 0, it's going to take whatever number it last got to, which might mean that the stuff in your passage starts halfway through what you'd planned. It might mean that it never shows up because the counter is already way higher than any of your passage numbers are. And so basically it's a good thing to remember that you always need to reset if you're using multiple counters in a game, but this is basically, it gives it the starting point. And then live 1 second just means that at 1 second, this is what happens. This happens every second as well. Every single second, trans counter is going to go up by 1. And then when it gets to 5, it's going to tell us kettle's boiled. So I'm gonna move it to, because otherwise it won't look like I'm telling the truth. I'm just going to bring up kettle time. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you see that it's dropped off now, and it's also, I can see in the bottom right hand corner. Let me just drag it up so you can see as well. Twine and play. Sorry, this is me having to do a lot of like messy dragging and live editing. But hey, live editing is always like quicker than having to deal with actually making these as videos and editing them in post. So what you should be able to see there, I think, is you can see the number is like, it's now 40, 41, 42. It's just going to keep going because we've not told it to stop. It's basically the deal with that. So let's make it a little bit neater. Let's do it in a way that's going to be a bit more useful to us. So presumably we want to just keep showing the fact that the kettle's boiled. So all you need to do is stop, colon, within a pair of brackets. Now I'll show you what that does. But I do need to rejig where I have the visuals on Twine. You might be going, Chloe, why didn't you just have 2 different window captures of the same window so you can effortlessly click between both the bottom right corner and the actual like bulk of it? To that I say, I'm tired. Right, so we've got, I'll explain why that's shifting in a moment. We've got kettle's boiled, and it's just going to stay there because the counter is now at 5. It's fixed at 5. It's not going up. It's always what we want it to be. So this is like, that is basically the core of it. And a lot of things that you can do with it are just how you combine those different things. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly put this all within, I've just put curved brackets as we've talked about before in, and that's why this is no longer moving, because before it was kind of showing as the timer, as we got to that 1 second and suddenly new code came into play, it was taking up more space. So that's why the line was shifting. And we will always have this line. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to remove the line from the footer so that we just don't have that everywhere. Okay. So that was me removing the line from the footer. So obviously there's a few different things we could do here. Like we could put, if is 4, almost there. Also, there might be reasons that you want to have multiple counters going multiple times if there's different things happening. A thing that I've used timers a lot for, especially multiple timers, is puzzles. If you want to kind of recreate a puzzle of, you know, you press this button, this light flashes 3 times, this light flashes 5, this light flashes once, what's the code to get out the room kind of thing. Obviously that's a very niche application, but just as an example. What you can also do, it's up to you whether you'd want to use something really different in names wise, but I tend to do just like trans counter 1, 2, 0. And then I might kind of go, okay, live 2 seconds, set trans counter 1 to it plus 1. And then, so this is, you know, someone's not just boiling a kettle, they're scrambling eggs. I'm not going to bother putting stop because I'm just kind of playing around with different timers and stuff to show what they'll look like. But obviously, yeah, remember to do that final bracket at the end there. Okay, so let's have a look and see how that comes up. If we then go here and I set it going, so the counters are starting to go, but they're going at different paces. Almost there, kettle's boiled, great. And this, the other trans counter one is only actually going up every 2 seconds, which is why it's taking longer. Interesting. Trans counter 1 isn't showing up. Let's figure out why that is. Basically, I can still see that number going up, going up, going up. Very, like, slowly but surely. Let's not put the kettle on, we want kettle time. Ah! Can anyone like spot the really obvious error I've made here? It's because I've not put trans counter 1, I've put trans counter, and trans counter was never going to get to 6 because it stops at 5. It's as simple as that. That's again another reason why you might want to go like egg counter and egg counter. Here we go. So we're just counting. There's nothing there. Obviously, if it was a game, you might want something there. Almost there. Kettle's boiled. The other counter is still going quite slowly because it's only going up every 2 seconds because we've varied that a little bit. Why is trans counter being so... Oh! Okay. Okay. This is... And again, I didn't even show you that online. I'm sorry. I was basically showing you something not working. This whole consistency thing, it's going to get you. This is where you see, like, you start having to be able to really focus. Make sure you're changing all of the same things at once. It wasn't showing up then. I will just show you, hopefully. It's showing up now. You can see the kettle's boiled, but we never actually got any shot of the eggs. So 4, 5, kettle's boiled, great, egg counter is on 4, egg counter is on 5, egg counter is on 6, eggs are ready. However, that's going to disappear after 2 seconds because that one isn't stopping, it's still going up. So that shows you a little bit there. There's one other thing, because we've got 15 minutes left, that I wanted to show you in terms of another application for using a counter and how you can make something appear. Because sometimes it's not necessarily like a game thing where you want to represent time moving about. It might just be a visual thing. Like it does look really nice when, rather than all of the text on a Twine game just appearing in one block, it fades in or it fades out, or there's a little bit of a like rhythm to it. So I've got something I've copied from another game I have. And I'm going to just bump it in here. So what you can see here is this is something, I'll be totally honest, and this really shows how I'm a self-taught coder, not a trained coder. I always initially like copied it with that because that's what was in the internet tutorials. It's never made a big difference to me. So you set the counter to 0. Let's say entry text. Set entry text to 0. Set entry text to 0 to +1, because remember we've got to do all this. So this looks, again, it might look like a little bit more complex. I promise it's fine. The main new thing is the sample transition way of doing it. So we've set the counter to 0. After 1 second, we're going to set it to it +1. These gaps, like, they make no difference. Do not worry about them. And then if it's 1, we're going to show sample 1. Now, the way that you make a sample is this. That's quite a complex sample. But how you would make a sample is you do just the straight line up. You give the sample a name. So let's call this sample 3. And then you put something in some square brackets. And that's it. So let's say we want to go, hello, would you like some tea? So we're just going to make a different sample, sample 2. I will explain transition in a second. Basically, it's just going to make it look prettier. Let's do one with transition, one without transition, then we can show the difference. Would you like some tea? Okay. If entry text is 1, we're going to show sample 1. If entry text is 2, we're going to show sample 1. But we're also going to show sample 2. And that is something to look out for, actually, that again is a thing to get used to. Whenever you refer to a sample, it's with a question mark at the front. It's not with, you might get quite used to using $signs because of variables and putting things in inventories and stuff like that. But this is question marks, and you'll get error codes if you put in a $sign as relating to a sample. So, and then we'll stop it so that we can actually see what we've done. Okay, I'm also going to, just so it's not really messy, with white space coming in, I'm going to put everything in some curved brackets. So let's just bring up the internet and then title passage. Hello, would you like some tea? Now I'm just going to play that once more and like look for the difference between how they both appear. One has a dissolve and one doesn't. Hopefully it's kind of clear. Also, the absolute bane of my life is not putting in spaces where I will need spaces, but forgetting that I need spaces because all I've put in is just like bits of code that are going to get smudged together, and the game doesn't know because it's a game that I would want a space there. But yes, basically, here we have dissolve. It's kind of my favoured transition. It's pretty much the main one I use. If you go to like the Twinery wiki, and I'll put links into this, basically all these videos are uploaded to YouTube, and there will be links under the description that have copyable code that you can just use, any of the code that's been like referenced in this session. And so you've got, hello, would you like some tea? Let's make it all look a little bit nicer. So we're just gonna do transition dissolve, and that's just the way that it appears. So it's not gonna be just boom, immediately there. Again, depends on the game you're making, depends on the tone you want. I just really like, you know, white text fading in on a black background is what gets me. I'm also gonna just put this on a different line. This might be the first time we've kind of put this within a little bit of code, but it will work just the same. It'll break them up. It means that they're not appearing on the same line. And so I wasn't showing you what I was doing. I'm just going to show you what I've done there. So I have added in transition dissolve, and then I've added another bracket because I need this to be within brackets so that it knows that transition dissolve is applying to this. So that's why it now has two brackets at the end, because the first one is 1, 2, 3. Yeah, the first one is the sample one. So all of this is the sample and all of this is dissolve. And then I just added the little greater than, smaller than symbols around the P and then around the /P to create paragraph breaks, because we need to do that because we've told the game to ignore white space. So let's just see exactly how that looks, see the slight difference in it. So that fades in. That did not look like that faded in as much as I wanted it to. Sometimes it's just a trick of the mind. I'm gonna check that though. Oh no, it does fade in. That was literally just my brain. So that shows you something a little bit different. And obviously you can have kind of like big chunks of text if you want it to be that someone has a few seconds to read this, and then they have a few seconds to read this, and then they have a few seconds to read this. Then you might want to use something that is basically just I say chunkier, what I mean is just that there's more stuff in there, but the actual code of it is very much the same. You just make more samples and you keep going, if this is this, show this sample, and such like. And obviously you can have it so that earlier ones disappear. If I say, let's not show that sample there, and then I set that to play, it's going to go, hello, would you like some tea? What is wrong with my coding right now? That's curious. Yeah, sorry, that's a different way that samples work. This is good. You're learning, I'm learning. So samples, once you bring it up, it will stay there. If you are just doing it how we did it earlier with like kettles boiling, where it was just, we were like, show this text or just have this thing, it's because we were using the show command, and that was me forgetting because it's been a while since I've done text in this particular way. But also, basically, it's just how you want to apply these different things. For instance, like you can use timers just to make something look cute and flashy. So let's just take out stops so we can have the thing running along. If entry text is 3, this is very much where it's just like, think of the thing that you want to do, and then there'll be a way that you can figure stuff out. Text color purple, American spelling of color, of course. Hello. And then if entry text is 4, I'm just going to do a very brief kind of like version of this. Obviously you could use loads of different colors and keep doing it with loads of different numbers. Text color red. Ah, yes, of course, that's me forgetting. So one of these would work and one of these would not, because of an error of mine, which is that if entry text is 3, I've not put this in full brackets, so I'd need to put another bracket there, and I'd need to put another bracket there. And you can see that slight difference in the colour, because I've not done enough in terms of my bracketing. So let's set that going and then transition over. Just in case you missed that, we've got hello, would you like some tea? And then it's just hello in different colours. And if I kept adding numbers, kept adding colours, I could just have like basically a flashing colour style appearance to it. So if you want something that shows in the same place and just like overlaps or overlays the thing that was there before, just do it as bracket of text. If you want something that's going to stick, that you're not going to continually have to remind the game to keep like up for you, use sample. And the one other thing about timers is that, of course, if you wanted to set entry text to 1, you can loop it. So if this works how I expect it to, it won't, because I've not actually got it within that little section. Let me just, and again, I'm so sorry, let me just show you what I've been doing. So what I've added is this little section here. So basically, when the counter gets to 4, it's gonna set back to 1. So it will just rotate round. So I'll show you what that's going to do to it. And it's just literally putting set this thing to this. And you obviously don't have to set it to 1. You could just kind of have it go through a few things and then like loop at the end with something. But let me just show you what that's going to do to it. So I've set it going. Hello, 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 hello. And it's just going to loop through that because the other things are already samples that are already up, that are already being shown. So that's how you do that. I think that's kind of a decent sense of what timers are, and or at least how you can use some timers. I will, like I say, I will have a look into other things. But yeah, I've used timers for various things, often like kind of puzzly aspects or to reflect time passing. Like someone hiding and having to wait until there's a opportune moment for them to escape from a room. You know, you might have a timer that's running for 30 seconds and then you want to just be able to click something, because you can have anything that kind of comes up in a timer. You could have like a clickable link. So you have to click at the right time. You have to get it as soon as it's up, that kind of thing. I think that's kind of it for today. Obviously, inventories and timers. Do take a look at the YouTube channel. I will just throw up the link. You can tell just how tired I am. I'll throw up the link in here. So that's where all past streams are of all the streams. This is every other week because Saturdays on this channel alternate between text adventures and improv songs about TTRPGs. So if you have a character or a campaign and you would like a song just about them made up on the spot by me and my ukulele, then do join next Saturday at 11 a.m. And then obviously the Saturday after that, we will have another one of these. I'm not sure what's going to be covered in the next one. I think there's a lot of kind of little bitty things. So I might do like a kind of random pick and mix to begin with, and then I'll probably get a little bit more into things like how to do background images that are behind the text, how to do sound that flows throughout your game rather than is just in individual passages, and a few things like that. But if you are ever curious, just at Chloe Mashter on Twitter, and I'm more than happy to try and tailor these to particular problems or curiosities that people have. And keep an eye on this channel. I am in the process of setting up a new project called Along-a-Me. Just keep an eye on Twitter or sign up to my mailing list, maybe the Roll Flip Draw mailing list. Is it that instruction? Yes, amazing. Sign up to the mailing list for updates on that. Basically, that is going to be a very experimental thing with a mix of tabletop games and maybe LARP style games, other kinds of games, and also streams that might be performances, they might be actual plays, but it's all going to be linked into kind of this big world building experiment with game designers and theatre makers working together and doing stuff based off of what players and audiences discover in their own games. And that's going to be really cool. I'm very excited. So that will be a little bit more in terms of some streams happening on this channel. But aside from that, I hope this has been handy, and bye. Have a lovely weekend.